And in the case of Chile, there is still much to do. Chile has been a success story economically. Chile is still a very poor country. And this cannot be denied, that half of the population in Chile is really living into poverty. You know, I was asked recently by some Chilean journalists, how did we react in Europe when we saw the television transmission of the salvation of the miners? And, you know, our reaction beyond the heroism of these people and the technical performance and the involvement of the government, what we saw that Chile was still a very poor country. We saw all this poverty, you know, the miners' family, and we have in Europe this idea of Chile being a, you know, middle-class country and a success story, and but because we don't know the real country. So suddenly many Europeans discovered that Chile was still a very poor country, and that for half of the population, life is not good, life is short, opportunities are limited. Therefore, you need sustained economic growth, you need progress because we respect the dignity of the people, and because this is what the people want. You mentioned the fear of progress, and some NGOs are against progress. But if you ask the people, they are for it. They are for it, and they know best what is good for them. So sometimes there is a confusion about what progress is about, what capitalism is about, and once again, it's about dignity of the people and giving them more freedom of choice. We have been mentioned, and the senior minister in our conference talked about sustainability. This is also a very complicated concept, because sustainability, I think, means much more than renewable energy. I mean, I think sustainability should include safety, productivity, research improvement. I will take the Hydro-Icen project. What would be a sustainable project? This is a sustainable project. Why? Because it will provide, or it could provide, the energy which is needed for Chile for a very long time on a renewable basis, because you reuse constantly the same kind of water, because the project is based on the best sophisticated technology which is today available. So the objection against this project are basically what? They are purely aesthetic in a way. They're aesthetic. Well, people don't like the idea of the high power line crossing the country. Well, you get accustomed to it. In France, we have a lot of high power line, and we don't consider that they destroy nature. They become part of the landscape because they are well designed. And I insist on that. In France, as you know, our energy is mostly based on nuclear energy. And we had a long debate on how to integrate the nuclear plant in the landscape and how to integrate the power line in the landscape. And there are ways to do that. Of course, the line will not disappear. But there are ways to make things, I would say, not invisible, but acceptable. Acceptable. A power line does not necessarily destroy the landscape. It does not necessarily destroy the nature. It all depends on the way you design it. And so there must be a great effort if this project is implemented, not only on the integration of the plant themselves in the Icen region, but integration in the landscape of the power line, and this, again, is possible. Now, as I say that I would elaborate on this project, which is symbolic of what's going on in Chile, is it necessary? And are there alternatives? Those are two fundamental questions. Is it necessary? Well, I think it's more than necessary. You have no choice. And Chile has a lack of energy problem. And as you are a fast-growing country, in 10 years from now, if you want to sustain a 5% growth rate to improve the quality of life of the people, you need to double the capacity of energy production. You have no choice. So the question is not to increase or not to increase energy production. The question is, do you want to improve the quality of life of the people? If you want to improve the quality of life of the people, you need a 5% a year growth, or maybe 6% if everything goes well. And in order to reach this growth rate, you need to double your energy production. Well, there is no way around it, okay? The only way around it is to say, I don't want progress anymore. I want Patagonia to become a Disneyland for rich people. And so then you don't need energy. But if you escape this kind of very selfish behavior, you have no choice. So the real question is, are there any alternative to this specific project? And you will have more projects in the future. Well, all the alternatives I've read about are not convincing. And they are even worse. They are even worse. For example, all the projects, building a network between very small factories, hydroelectricity production all around the country. I know this is supported by some senator on the right wing, saying, well, but we could build a 1,000 small hydroelectric project all around the country. That's okay. The problem is that you still have to bring the energy from the place where it is produced to the place where it is consumed. So you don't resolve the high power line problem, you multiply it. Because if you have 1,000 plants, that means you have 1,000 lines. And the whole country will be covered with a network of electricity line. And economically, aesthetically, and from an environmental point of view, it would be much worse than the Isen hydroelectric project. But so you'll have to confront this. It is your affair, but I think the decision should be based on rational facts, and facts should be discussed, and only the facts. If anybody proposes something better, that's your choice. Finally, as global warming has been mentioned, global warming is the iconic debate of our time in terms of environment and development. The problem with global warming is like what we said about ecology, very difficult to make a distinction between what we know and what we don't know. And I think all our efforts, and if we are honest, is to try to make this distinction. Probably there is a trend toward global warming. Probably there are climate changes, but is this a new phenomenon, or only are the observations new? Because in the past, we didn't have the tool to observe global warming. We have started observing global warming or the evolution of the ice on the North Pole and the South Pole only because we had satellites starting in the 1970s. So we are describing a period which we cannot compare to former period. We don't know what happened in the past. Therefore, to talk about global warming today is a bit premature because we don't have the data for the past centuries. So there is a trend, but we can't compare this trend to former trends. Now, is this trend connected to industrial activity and to carbon dioxide? It is a theory. There may be a connection, but we are not sure, and we are not sure if it is an exclusive connection. Maybe there are other parameters. So we have to look further. And we have to say very clearly that global warming is not a fact, it is a theory. And the most honest scientists about that, people working at the IPCC, say, well, we cannot prove it. It is only a theory. And it will be needed to be proven by fact, but facts are not available. My conclusion is, on this subject, is we don't know much. As we don't know much, we should do something. Some people would say we don't know much, therefore we do nothing. My position is to say we don't know much, therefore we must act. But we must act very cautiously. We must act very cautiously, and we must avoid any kind of taxation or cap and trade system which would destroy the economic development, because the poorest people would be the more impacted if growth was stopping. It would be absolutely dramatic for the poorest people on Earth. And I think that our priority, once again, under the penguin, the priority are our sisters and brothers. Our priority is mankind. I mean, the billions of people still live in poverty. And as far as we know, the best way to extract them out of poverty is economic development. And we know how to do economic development now. We know what are the right economic strategy. We know we need energy, but we also know how to employ energy more efficiently. And last remark before I go, and about alternative energies. We would all love to have alternative non-polluting energy. That would be wonderful. Regretfully, today they don't exist. I mean, they exist in theory, or they exist on the periphery, like solar energy, wind energy. But today, nobody has yet discovered the way to replace the traditional and cheap energy we have based on hydroelectricity, coal and diesel and gas and nuclear. We know this works. We know it's relatively safe. We know it is cheap. We know it can be the basis of a sustained development. We know how to improve the productivity of these sources of energy. We don't know still how to replace them. So it would be really crazy to destroy what we know to replace it by something that we don't know and that we call renewable energy. I'm quite sure that through more research, in 10, 20, 30 years, we'll be able to find other sources of energy, but this is not the case. So the people who promote renewable energy have the right to do so. They must be very modest. They must stick to facts, and the facts show that there is this renewable energy can only be a supplement to the main source of energy, and you can't avoid the kind of investment which are necessary for Chile in order to improve the life of the people. And once again, I like to quote my favorite economist, and he was not an economist. He was Indian. His name was Mahatma Gandhi. And Gandhi said something very nice about economic progress. He said, well, I don't know about progress. I'm only interested in the situation of the poorest Indian women. What you propose in terms of economic development, will it improve or not the situation of the poorest Indian women? And I think this is the best criteria of a good economic policy. I would say in the case of Chile, I mean, an economic policy, including energy production, should be judged from the perspective of the poorest Chilean women. Will it improve our situation or not? And I do think eventually the situation should be based on what the poorest Chilean women will tell you about hydroelectricity and economic development. Thank you.